Lost in Translation. My name is Nico, and we are looking at the Torah portion of Ki Teizei this week, and the 10 things that you will miss if you are only reading the portion in English. So let's start right away with number 1. Captive women. The Torah continues to talk about war. Before it was talking about rules of war for the nation. Now it's talking about in the specific for a person, for a man who's fighting in the war, what he can do or how he can appropriately handle his passions for a beautiful woman who is among the captives that they might take. Okay, and again, there are the corporeal consequences of this. In the modern world, there really isn't an analog for this. We don't have this experience anymore. We don't take spoils from cities that we conquer. No, we're not. It's just not part of what we do. But again, if we understand that the Torah is a spiritual document and that this war we're talking about here is a spiritual war, we have to understand the relationship between masculine and feminine in spirituality, that the masculine represents the will to bestow, or at least that part of the will to receive that calculates on behalf of the will to bestow, right? That there's this part of us that wants to be closer to the creator, and the female in spirituality is that which receives in order to receive. So not to say that the female is bad. The female is the complete created reality, right? She's exactly the way she's supposed to be. And it's the correction of that female reception that completes the creative process. So if we have this male, this Jewish male that does war against the will to receive, and amongst the captives, and we perceive that there is something good in that will to receive, okay, take mastery over it, right? Bring it into your home. Let it go through this process where it separates from its original male connection, which didn't have anything to do with a calculation to connect to the creator, right? And after all this, if we can calculate that it's actually possible to connect to this type of reception in a way that still connects back to the creator, then great. Make this female, this spirit, this desire and spirituality, assume it into your calculation. Take it. It's now married to the male part, right? So if we have to understand this relationship between male and female, these descriptors in desire, in spirituality. And when we do, we can kind of start to see the relationships between male and female in Torah. And there's a lot going on here, which allows, again, this is about calculating if it's possible to connect to a desire in a way that still allows us to reach the end of correction. And if it's not possible, we have to let her free. We can't sell her. We can't do anything else. We have to take no profit from it at all. allow that female aspect of desire to go away for no benefit to ourselves. Number two, it's a chain reaction. It's interesting how this portion progresses because there's kind of this chain reaction in the way it's set up. That first we start with this captive woman, right? That then moves into what we should do if we come to hate our wife, right? There's one wife that's beloved and another that's despised, right? So there's this connection between the two situations. And after there's talk about the loved wife and the despised wife, and which son should get the primary inheritance, the very next discussion is about a wayward and rebellious son. Okay, and what to do with him. And so we're seeing the consequences of the inappropriate assumption of the foreign desire that maybe becomes a despised wife. The product of that union is not righteous and has to be put to death, either through the parents' actions or, right, because there's this whole thing about pelting the wayward son with stones, or eventually there's talk about if a man commits a sin and is sentenced to death. So eventually, whether it's the parents or society as a whole, there tends to be this chain reaction that if we let our desire out of control, we don't check it, it rolls into the production of something that ends up being put to death. So our unrighteous or our incorrect calculation in spirituality has spiritual consequences, which eventually we talk about putting something to death in spirituality. We mean that we don't use it anymore. We don't touch it anymore. So we start off with this desire that's foreign, that we like. We're going to bring it in. We see that it produces something that's not right. And eventually we have to close it off. So if we didn't let it free and we kept it around, maybe eventually we're going to see that it's something that needs to be no longer used. A desire that is no longer actualized is a desire that's been put to death. Okay, number three, male garb. Okay, here they're using the word attire, clothing. It's not important exactly which word, but the whole idea. Clothing, again, in spirituality is what we take upon. It's something that covers the desire, right? And so something that covers the male part of the desire is this intention to bestow, right? And this whole talk about male attire not being on a woman, and a man cannot wear a woman's garment. Again, okay, there is the corporeal aspect of this. But again, if we see what a man and a woman are in spirituality, we might think that we would try to invert this relationship, to drive our bestowal through our will to receive. Can't work. It won't work, because the calculation has always got to be, can I use this desire in a way that connects me back to similarity with Hashem? And that, by definition, is bestowal, calculating reception, It's male to female, reversing that clothing, trying to if we calculate it based on what I want, and then try to justify it with bestowal, doesn't work. That's not the way spirituality, it's just not the way it works. We can't get close to the creator like that because there is no reception in the creator. Number 4, levels of creation. This is something that we've seen before in Torah, that we've got these different levels of desire in creation: speaking, animate, vegetable, inanimate. And it's interesting here that the Torah is handling each and every one of these in this section. So we had the discussion of men and women at the speaking level, right? The animate, now we're seeing, what to do with oxen, what to do with your brother who's lost something, what to do with he and his donkey, or his garment now is an inanimate, right? There's also talk about how to sow the vineyard, not to mix species, and not to mix linens and wool, right? So all these different areas of desire, from the highest speaking form down to the lowest inanimate form of desire, is really being talked about in Torah here, and aligning all of these levels of desire so that they are pointed at the will to bestow and the effort to become similar to the Creator. Okay, number 5. Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites. Okay, we've gotten into some prohibitions in certain unions, right? Because we've been talking about, male and female and their connection. And we have seen these relationships between the offspring of Lot, the nephew of Abraham, or our father Abraham Avinu, right? That Ammon and Moab, right? They were the fathers of 2 nations, and these nations are not meant to marry into Israel. Okay. It says Ammonite and Moabite. Lo yavu Ammoni u'Moavi. Now in the Talmud, they've discussed this heavily, that it doesn't say Ammonite or Moabite, right? So that females from these nations can marry into the nation of Israel. So it is, again, if we're looking at what male and female is here, it is okay for us to adjust these desires so long as the calculation is in order to bestow. So this quality of Lot that had to be separated from Abraham in the beginning is adjustable. We can adjust it with Yashar Kel, with straight to the Creator, right? And we see this theme carry through because eventually there is a famous Moabitess, right? Woman from Moab named Ruth. There is the Megillah Ruth, which shows us how eventually this Moabite woman joins the nation of Israel, and she becomes the progenitor to King David. So King David is actually this synthesis of the two qualities of Lot and Abraham, now everything corrected and perfect. That's part of why he is the Mashiach king, right? Why he is the king of Israel, because he is the synthesis of these qualities that were separated before the nation of Israel could come into existence in Egypt. Another interesting point here is that right after here, right, we're seeing why we are not allowed in, because because Ammon didn't help the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt, and because Moab tried to curse the nation of Israel through Baal Peor. Okay, now whatever was going on there, if you remove the reception for reception calculation, we can adjust it for reception in order to bestow. Furthermore, we see that we're not allowed to despise an Edomite. So even the male, right? Because Edom is from Esau, brother of Jacob, right? These are sons of Yitzhak, sons of Abraham, right? That there's even what can be used in the male aspect of Edom. Remember, Edom also connects back to dome, similarity, right? So this similarity to the creator. So we've got these different qualities described by these different nations. Some, their female aspect can be incorporated into Israel. And even with the Edomite, its male aspect can be incorporated into Israel as well. Okay, number 6. Camp purity. Again, back to this theme of war, this spiritual war, right? If we've gone out to do combat with our enemies, the enemies are the different aspects of the will to receive. Well, the camp goes out. The camp itself is meant to be a holy place. It's supposed to be a place where the presence of Hashem can reside. So there are all of the purity laws that are associated with this here. So if anybody becomes impure, right, here specifically with a nocturnal emission, he's meant to go outside the camp, right? If somebody has to take care of his daily needs in terms of the toilet, he has to do this outside. And it's interesting, this is one of the first documents that we see where they are meant to keep what's they're saying a stake here. I've also seen it translated as shovel, but basically this is latrine requirements, right? That this is something that has to happen outside of the camp. So again, we're talking about things that bring impurity. And what is impurity? Impurity is that which brings us further away from Hashem. So this camp that we established to make our war against the will to receive, the basis point of this has to be our desire to connect to Hashem. That has got to be our base camp. That has got to be where we're coming from. And that place has to be kept pure. So and if we fall from the purity required of that camp, we have to exit the camp. Maybe even leave spirituality alone for a while. Recenter, make the new calculation, try to understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and then enter the fray again. Number 7, promiscuity and remarriage. Okay, this is interesting here. They're using the term prostitute for what I've also seen translated as promiscuous elsewhere. Right? That there shouldn't be any promiscuous daughters in Israel or promiscuous men in Israel. And again, if we're looking at this from the lens of spirituality and these unions that are allowed and not allowed, right? The whole idea of spiritual promiscuity is that we're losing focus. We're jumping from one desire to the next desire to the next desire. It doesn't have to be sexual. It's just that we lose focus of the process of becoming closer to Hashem, and we're constantly seeking after one pleasure to the next to the next. This is spiritual promiscuity. This is placing other gods in front of Hashem, right? Whether it's from the female aspect of reception or from the male aspect of reception in order to bestow, right? Either one of these, from either one of these calculations, if we're looking to gratify any desire that comes along in such a way that Hashem is not part of the calculation, well, this can't exist in Israel. So it's not so much as a prohibition as it is a description of something that's impossible, right? So again, okay, promiscuity from a corporal aspect, yes, we can understand how that can lead to spiritual degradation because, of course, we're gratifying one specific desire, and it's usually egotistical. But at the same time, from a spiritual perspective, it can just be about being scattered in what we think we want and what we desire, and not keeping true to the goal of our spiritual purpose, which is connection back to Hashem. In fact, here the Torah goes on to expound that if a man is married a woman and he divorces her, and that woman remarries, and then that marriage is somehow canceled, we can't reassume that relationship, right? Again, there is the corporeal aspect to this, but if we continue to focus on what male and female means in spirituality, we have separated ourselves from a desire that we cannot calculate its use in order to bestow. And that desire somehow connects to some other calculation, which we're using for personal gratification. And now we want to try to justify it through bestowal. No, it's not going to work, right? Because now it's connected to our gratification. We know that it's only about our gratification. And now we're trying to use spirituality to justify our personal gratification. This is precisely the spiritual consequence, what this part of the Torah is talking about, when a husband who divorces cannot remarry the wife that has married someone else. Okay, number 8. Tzaharat and slander. The Torah is reminding us here about the Tzaharat affliction, which is usually an indication of spiritual pride, and telling us to remember what happened with Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that basically it came upon her because of her slander against Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Now, what's interesting here is that the Torah talks about all these different economic arrangements, right? You don't go into a home to take security, that you don't, that you, you don't make a poor person go to sleep without a security. You pay people on time, that, all these different, not to pervert judgment from a stranger and an orphan, all these things that might cause people to speak badly about you. Even if it's true, it's still lashon hara. Even if it's true, it can bring about spiritual impurity in the one who's speaking poorly, right? So we've been told to be careful about this punishment and about slander. Yes, we shouldn't slander, but then there's all these different things that we should be careful about in the way we conduct ourselves, so that we don't cause others to fall into the trap of slander and the spiritual degradation that comes from it. Number 9, levirate marriage. We've seen this before. Again, the Torah is reminding us about this. If there's brothers and one of the brothers is married and he dies, the other brother should marry his wife in order to, okay, we've seen this before. There's this discussion of levirate marriage where there are brothers and one brother is married and he dies childless, and the other brother should marry the deceased brother's wife in order to have children in the name of his deceased brother, so that his name will continue within the nation of Israel. Okay, again, taking this back to the discussion of unions between male and female in spirituality. Okay, that maybe we're not talking about a wife that married somebody else and then came back. We're talking about what happens if the male aspect somehow fails. Okay, that somehow we've failed in the male aspect, that it has died, which means we can't use it in spirituality anymore. We've come to understand that this calculation was incorrect, right? Well, when we've developed the correct calculation, the brother of the previous calculation, right? Again, always trying to connect back to Hashem. Once we've adjusted this, we can try to activate this desire again. Okay, so that, okay, if we know that the desire only works through gratification of the self, then no. But if we know that the problem wasn't one of self-gratification, but was somehow there was a problem in our calculation of connection to Hashem, then we can find a way through this levirate marriage to take this wife on. But also, discussion of levirate marriage gives a way for the brother to say, no, I'm not going to take this woman as my wife. So in spirituality, we're not required to take on that desire that was maybe connected to our previous spiritual mistake. We can leave it alone. Okay? It's not required to go forward with that connection. The Torah gives us options here. So it's just interesting that it continues to bring all these issues of unions and male and female together in the same portion. Okay, number 10, Amalek. We are being reminded of what happened. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, right? That he attacked, he tried to destroy Israel on the way out of Egypt. Amalek is a descendant of Esau, right? And this aspect of Esau, this aspect of what wants to destroy Israel, has to be destroyed, right? So again, it's just interesting that we're looking at all of these different possible unions between the different nations, what to do about slander, right? Purity, different levels of desire. And at the end, we're seeing the absolute antithesis of Israel, which is Amalek, which must be destroyed, right? And so by not observing all these things that are talked about in this portion, we are making a world where Amalek is not only left to survive, actually is in command, right? The opposite of Israel reigns. Whereas here, we're giving this way, do these things, connect to Hashem, and through that connection to Hashem, Amalek will be wiped away. There is no one, there is no enemy, there is no nation out there corporeally to kill. There is only connection to Hashem. And through that connection to Hashem, Amalek cannot exist. And so that's what we're talking about when Hashem grants us rest or respite from our enemies all around you in your land, right? That you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget. Okay, so the whole point is to focus on that connection to Hashem, and through that, the laws of spirituality will make it impossible for Amalek to exist. Very deep, very spiritual portion this week. Share with me your ideas in the comments. I invite you to like, subscribe, comment, share. And until next time, be well.